go first.
Sure. My name is Erin Welty. I am the chair for the CDA and a Verona resident.
Brett?
I'm Brett Poglaze, member of the CDA and Verona resident.
Adam?
Adam Fry, member of CDA and Verona resident.
Katie?
I'm Katie Cole, and I'm the alderperson on the City Council for District 2, the rep to the CDA.
And Luke?
I am Luke Diaz, the current mayor of the city of Verona, and I think I could use a haircut, but I'm willing to wait.
Okay. Also, it looks like Steve, are you there? So CDA member Steve Rudolph is logged in, but I don't think he can speak, or I think he's having some technical issues. So I guess we'll note him as not being at the meeting until he's able to speak and act. The only one that I'm looking for is Dia, and I don't see her in the audience.
I'll text her.
Yeah, if you could. And if she's got a screen name that I don't recognize, if you could text me that name, it'd be great. Okay, Aaron, I think you can go on number 3, which is the approval of minutes.
Wonderful. I'd accept the motion to approve the minutes from the December 19th, 2019 meeting.
Move approval.
Is there a second discussion?
I'll
A
second
second.
that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, hearing none, motion passes, and we'll move on to item number 4, which is the meat of tonight's meeting and the discussion and possible action on Sugar Creek Elementary School and the New Century Charter School property RFP and developer interviews.
This is Catherine Holt with the City of Verona in the Planning Department. Tonight we had all of the RFPs that we're going to review for interviews. We had posted the RFPs to be due at the end of March, but we extended that until April 27th of this year due to the pandemic. We received 6 applications, which are posted to the city's website. Staff reviewed and scored those applications. Staff arranged for the CDA to interview 4 of the 6 applicants. Table 1 and the site plans are included in the packet for these 4 applicants that we're interviewing tonight. The CDA will interview and evaluate these 4 this evening and may select a proposal to go before the Common Council for action in June or July, which is still within the schedule that is posted as part of the RFP. The applicants tonight are requested to give a 10 to 15 minute presentation, allowing for the remaining time to answer questions from the CDA members and staff. We have allocated 30 minutes per applicant to discuss their project. The CDA may have discussions regarding the applicants at the end of the interviews with potential actions that are listed in the staff memo, which will be discussed again at the end of the interviews. Although this is a public meeting, the public is not allowed to speak, but they can watch and listen to the meeting. So they cannot ask questions directly to the applicant. However, the selected candidate would have to go through the development review process as their project proceeds, which has public hearings as it goes through Plan Commission and Common Council in the future. My suggestion tonight would be that as we go through this, we listen again to the applicants for their 15-minute presentation and try not to interrupt them since we are in Zoom. And then at the end of their presentation, then begin asking those questions.
How this is going to work from a logistics standpoint. There, Steve. How this is going to work from a logistics standpoint is when we get to each item on the agenda. So we have the 4 proposals here tonight. We have Gorman and Company, North Point Avanti, McKenzie Apartment Company, and Steve Brown Apartments. When we get to that item, each developer has identified their team that they want to have available to present or to answer questions. I'm going to promote their team kind of to a panelist role. And at that point, they can interact with us. And then when they're done, they'll be demoted back into the audience where they can watch the meeting, but won't be able to speak. So it's gonna, I don't want to say it'll be a little clunky on my side, but there'll be a little bit of lag on my side as I pull these people in, because some of these groups have, more than 2 people in them. So that's kind of the logistics when we get to each item, is they're going to get their, I'm going to have to bring them in, and there's going to be a little bit of lag as I bring them in. So I guess, are there any questions for staff of just the process in general? I guess, first of all, Steve, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You sound crystal clear. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry about that. I hadn't plugged it in. Oh, well.
Any questions in the process, I guess, for staff? Otherwise, at this point, I'll start getting a few things set up for the first one. I think, as Catherine said, there is the potential tonight, if you do want to take some action on this, that it has been noticed in the agenda. You also don't have to as well, but we can talk more about the process after we kind of have the presentations as well. So, any questions for staff? Otherwise, I will start getting the first person ready. Okay, I don't see any, so I'm gonna do some work here, so just hang with me. All right, so first one is Gorman and Company. I think Ted Mackham is in the audience. Ted, if you could just raise your hand. There's a function, if you, I think it's like 3 little dots. I think it's on the upper part of the screen, or I forget if it's in the participation participant panel, but if you can raise your hand somehow, just so I know which one is you. Because I think I know which one it is, but I don't want to pick the wrong one. Otherwise, I'm going to guess. All right. Well, I'm going to guess. Hey, Ted, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I cannot see you. Let me see if I can get your video started.
I'll get it. Here we go.
Okay. So I'm going to start the PDF here in about 2 seconds. Let me just finish getting it set up here.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Ted.
Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. Ted, take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for including me in this new format, which is very interesting for all, including the participants and the panelists. So I appreciate it. We were, well, let me tell you a little bit about Gorman and Company first. Gorman and Company has been around. We are headquartered in Oregon, Wisconsin, and have done a lot in Wisconsin, partnered with communities over the last 36 years to kind of do what they want. And we have a fully integrated staff. We have architects, we have a construction team, and we have a property management team. And the reason I like pointing that out is because truly the buck stops here, which is me. I'm your one point of contact. We usually would have, if we were in person, a member of each one of those disciplines with us tonight, but I thought for ease of logistics to make Adam's job a little easier, he'd just talk to me. But truly the buck stops with me in terms of all that happens in those disciplines. So you have one point of contact, which I think is pretty good. A good way of doing business. We have a large balance sheet. I didn't put a financial statement into the RFP. It was requested, but I said we would provide that if, in a sense, you wanted that later on in a confidential manner. We would definitely give that to you. But we were real excited about this site. Our chairman and founder, Gary Gorman, has loved Verona for a long time, would love to do something here, and we think it's one of the most prevalent up-and-coming communities around the Madison area that exists today and has so much potential. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here. We have two options that we gave you, and looking at your scoring sheet, it doesn't really fit into that. So I'm going to explain them both, and we prefer Plan 2, just so you know. But I did want to explain to you our philosophy on Plan 1, because I think it kind of goes into our whole ethos of how we approached this presentation. And the first one is Plan 1, which leaves the existing infrastructure of the school remaining. And the reason we do that is because at Gorman, we specialize in repurposing historic and non-historic buildings. We like to use the buildings that are in place if at all possible. And although we do not have a proposed use for that existing building or the existing school, we thought, well, what if Verona really wanted to kind of try to see if there was a use for that building? Maybe it's a year or so that you go out to the market to try to figure something out. We could help you with that process. And then in the meantime, you would have two components of our site plan that would go no matter if you picked Part 1 or Plan 1 or Plan 2. And that would be Component A, which we have here on your lower left corner, which is by Legion Street. And that's the affordable component that would be financed in part by WIDA affordable housing tax credits. And we would also apply to the Dane County for their affordable housing tax fund. And that had 87 units in it, some market rate, all the way primarily 50s and 60s percent of the county median income. Those are people that we would target for that. And just to give you I'll give you a 101 on how tax credits work, because I think that's important. Say you have just to keep the math simple, if you have a $10 million project, if you've got a 9% tax credit, which is what we would be competing for, that's $900,000 of tax credits that you would get awarded from WIDA. And that $900,000 is $900,000 of tax credits that the property would generate each year for 10 years. And that gives you $9 million of tax credits over a 10-year period. That $9 million of tax credits, you get a certificate from WIDA and they say, congratulations, you won. Here's your $9 million of tax credits for your $10 million project. And you take that $9 million and you put it towards your construction costs. And just for ease of math, each tax credit you get from WIDA is about $1 on the open market. It's about 90 cents, but just to keep the math simple, it's about $1. So you have a $10 million project that's funded by those tax credits of $9 million. You have $1 million, gap, right? You go out and get debt, and that debt is then what has to be funded by your rents. So your rents can be lower. You're building a market rate, beautiful project. It'll be, that the quality of that project in Component A will be similar to any other market rate you've seen in the area. But your rents are lower because your costs were lower because the tax credit subsidized that cost. Different than in a market rate, which would be Component B, that's a 70 unit market rate, which in Component B we were going to do. You would have, say, a $10 million project there. You have to bring in equity from somebody who would be, Gary Gorman in our sense, where you'd bring in $3 million of equity for a $10 million project. And then the rest has to be serviced by your rent. So you can see your rents are going to be a lot higher because you have to service that entire $10 million package. Whereas in Component A, your rents are lower because you're only servicing the $1 million. So that's the difference between the two. The quality would be very similar, but you're just targeting in Component A lower incomes than you were in Component B. If you have any questions on that, I'd field those. But I thought maybe that'd give you a little bit of difference on how the financing works between component A and component B. In component C, that's the historic schoolhouse, and we would use that as a amenity to the residents, as well as an amenity that would be for the public. And we'd put a maker space in there, a fitness room, and some community event space, and use the green space in front of there for community space with that surface parking lot there on the side to service that as well. Each one of those components would be in either site plan. That's why we kind of thought this was a neat way to think about it. And I saw the other responses from the other developers, and it just struck me that, you know, you have a lot. Verona's got a lot going on next door here on the other side of Legion Street with forward development. I looked on your plan commission. You got a lot of stuff coming up in terms of apartments online. And I'm like, man, do we really want to just slam as much as we can on this site? Or would you rather have kind of a walk-up community that's a little, you know, a little less dense? And so if you want to flip it over, Adam, to site plan 2. Thank you. So here we decided that if we wanted to take the school down and put Church Street through to Legion and Marietta, those were costs in terms of Church Street and extension and the school demolition that we couldn't really fit in our pro forma. It just didn't fit, so we thought that was a TIF. And we said a $2.5 million TIF. It would just be the cost to expand the road and the school. We kind of assumed on the high side there would be $2.5 million, but it would be what it would be. So if it was only $2 million in cost, it would only be $2 million in cost. But we would expand the market rate project, component B, to 55 townhomes that we would put around, which would be more like a walkable neighborhood. So all those interior paths we would pay for. It's just the Church Street going through and the school demolition, which would be paid for by the TID, which would be, you know, we estimated at $2.5 million. So that TID, we think, would be paid back in about 10 years, given that we had a total tax increment of $306,000, which was our estimate for what this Plan 2 would produce. So we just kind of thought, what does Verona want to be? And we thought that Verona would, I think, you know, just in our humble opinion, would like this walk-up kind of less dense community, since you have a lot of stuff going on the other side of Legion Street and around town, that this would be a nice component if you bookend it with some multifamily buildings, you know, with component A and B, and then in the middle you had some townhomes. And then, of course, component C would be the public amenity, and the resident amenity would be the kind of a community amenity that you would see in either site plan as well. Do you guys have any other questions on that part? So that's pretty much what we're proposing. And the first phase would have been a $38 million deal. The nice thing about, I thought the site plan 1, even though the school remains, is that it's a $38 million, you know, total development costs. It puts in $224,000 of taxes each year when stabilized, compared to the $306,000 that were planned to. But as nice as it's not, it's TIF'd in Plan 2. It is not in Plan 1. There is no TIF in Plan 1. So the city and the school district would get that tax increment on Plan 1 immediately, which I thought was an interesting dynamic, and maybe some people would like that. But here in Plan 2, the TID would then, of course, put all of that tax increment into a TIF district. And I didn't know, you know, whether or not Verona wanted to use the TIF tool in this scenario or not. So that's why we gave you Plan 1 and Plan 2. I think the better use of the site is Plan 2. But again, it does cost for that. It does cause that $2.5 million TID to be activated in our presentation. So that's about it. You guys have any other questions?
I'll ask one. This is actually a question for Adam. How much, Adam Sayer, I should say, how many ideas would we have for what to do with the school? You know, or how quickly could staff come up with a list, basically, that says, here are our options for the school?
How quickly?
Yeah.
I mean, probably within a couple weeks. I don't know how many be realistic, but we could give you a lot of ideas. I mean, there's a few out there I think we all know of already. I mean, but we could get you some ideas within a few weeks.
Okay. And then I guess my second question is for the presenter. How willing would you be to potentially do this proposal piecemeal? This was an issue that was raised at the Verona Council, I believe by Alder Touche, which was basically just, we might want to phase it in over time, especially with, COVID-19 and the kind of uncertainty around things, that it might make sense to do kind of a section by section and just see how it works. Would that work with your plans, either one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point in terms of time frame. Component A, which was the WIDA financed deal, that has a timeline which is very important for your RFP process to keep moving no matter who you choose, because you want to take advantage of the very, very lucrative Dane County Affordable Housing Fund for any type of component of a development that would include WIDA financing. They have a very lucrative affordable housing fund that you'd want to use to help subsidize that deal. And so that would be your first phase. That is what you would focus on first. And then as the city would like, we would bring on the market rate 70 unit component B. We would be willing to do that simultaneously. If you wanted to, even with the COVID right now, we feel like there is a market within Verona that would accept that. I would love to do something that would be a workforce housing type of deal, not a WIDA deal, but kind of like the missing middle of 80% county median income to 120 county median income. And I did not have time, unfortunately, to really flush this idea out. But we've seen a lot of communities adopt this workforce housing with teachers or first responders, or police, firefighters, that they have a preference that you actually can live there as a community within those type of public servants. And to me, that's really cool. And I think that would be an awesome thing at this location, especially in the middle of Verona. And then the townhomes would be kind of more families. So it'd be, if you had your druthers, you'd probably take this whole thing and say, let's make this a subdivision of single family homes. I mean, who wouldn't want to see that? That would be phenomenal. I'm not sure that would work here or not. We don't really do that. But I think the next best thing is to have, 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes that would create a neighborhood and a community that would have a market rate type of feel to it, where people would be living and breathing almost like a neighborhood, a single family home neighborhood. And that we could bring in as a phase, or the 70 unit as a phase. So but we would be willing to bring the whole thing on pretty much at once if you wanted to, or phased if you wanted to wait for that.
Great. I unmuted Aaron, by the way. So
Yep.
this I muted it.
Two-part question. One, under phase 1 with the school property, would the school property be never acquired, deeded back to the city? And if so, would Gorman be looking for any sorts of approvals or rights on what happens there, ultimately, whether it is a school or not? And 2, you indicated that the New Century building would remain apartment clubhouse uses plus makerspace and community purposes. Would that be managed by the apartment complex? And then same question for the green space. You talked about programming. Would that space be a city park, or would that be a park privately owned and operated for public use, but within the complex?
That's great questions. First of all, I would envision that if you did site plan 1 with our proposal, that we'd kind of mothball a little bit the school for a time that we agreed upon, let's say a year, and then we would help you market that, because we think experts in terms of experts in terms of utilizing spaces. The key to that school is, I'm sure there's some code issues, but it could be transferred into a very usable senior facility. You could look at that as a senior center or something. It's a kind of a one-story building that that you would really, you could reuse. If that didn't come to fruition, then I think you would have these two components that were already built, component A and B. And then if that didn't come to fruition, you'd tear it down and put the street extended, and I'd start building townhomes. So that would be kind of the phased plan there. You'd go to plan number 2 if you were going to take the school down. So in terms of approvals or whatever, if we were to find whatever uses would go into that school, then we would work with the city to kind of do whatever if they wanted to be a public project or a private project, whatever we could conjure up in the next year, we would ask for approvals or cooperate with you in that regard. If we didn't find anything, then we'd demo it and do the townhomes. That's what we'd want to do, which would be site plan 2. To answer your other question regarding component C, the historic building. So there was some proposals that said, hey, let's make this a national historic landmark. The reason you normally would do that with something like that is you would want to get historic tax credits on it, so that, again, just like the WIDA tax credits, it would subsidize your construction costs, okay? The problem is that school is in pretty good shape, and the amount that you would have to invest into that schoolhouse to make the historic tax credits saleable to another entity would be a lot. And I'm not sure you're really going to spend that. That would be our cost of renovating that. We would manage it, and we would manage the green space as well. So that would be our cost and our management. Unless you guys said that, hey, we don't like really how you're using Exhibit C. We'd like it to be a senior center. Oh, okay. Well, if you guys wanted a senior center, then you guys got to take it. But if you want to do it the way we said we would do it, we would assume those costs. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions on that? It's a good question. I don't know how we're doing.
I have a question. Sorry. I was just wondering, to kind of go off of what Aaron said, with the green space, do you have any plans for that to be like a big public green space, or is it just kind of just what it is? Do you have any programming, like any playgrounds or any other public use? That was one thing I think we had kind of noted that we would like is some public use green space.
Right. So like somebody I saw in some responses that there was a farmer's market there. So, all of what we're putting is just kind of a proposed idea, but you could put a farmer's market there if people park there. Cause I like the parking laid out there. That could be totally for the public and then the people who are using it. So in other words, if you were the way I envision it is if somebody wanted to have a birthday party there or any type of party and they wanted to reserve the space there, they could, rent that whole thing out and use it. Or if you wanted to have a public event there, you would just reserve that space as the public, and the public would come there, park there, either walk there, drive there, and then utilize that as a farmer's market or an art fair. You could put tents up for an arts fair, would be really cool. So it would be kind of managed by Gorman, but it could be used by the public. And in the apartments, it would just kind of be open if it wasn't reserved. It would just, people could play Frisbee or whatever, But if you had it reserved, you'd have it reserved. And then you'd kind of block it off and say somebody's using this for this purpose. So it'd be kind of semi-private, semi-public, but open to the public. I think it's kind of a cool concept too, because somebody would actually manage it. I got a lot of people when I talked to in the community that said, don't give us a public something we got to pay for. Give us something that you guys can, that'll be a actual public tool and an asset, but not at expense of the city. I heard that a lot, a pool being one of them. We don't really love the pool because we got to pay for it. If you want to do a pool and operate it, that's great. But, I think something like this is kind of that happy medium where it could be a public asset but privately managed. Any other questions? All right. That's pretty much all I have right now. Unless you just wanted to get into the details of what we submitted, but I think that's the concept.
Anything else for Ted? We got a few minutes here if anyone has any pressing questions. Okay. Well,
Okay.
thanks, Ted. I'm going to demote you back to the audience, and I appreciate
Sounds
your time. What's that?
Sounds ominous.
It shouldn't be too bad. I might lose you. I don't think I will, but thanks for coming, Ted. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Yep.
Okay, I think the next one up is North Point Avanti. We're a little ahead of schedule, but we did notice the times is approximate on the agenda. So as long as everyone is comfortable moving to the next one, any objections? No? Okay. So the main person for this one is going to be Sean O'Brien. Let me find Sean. Oh, he raised his hand. Thank you.
Mute. All right.
Hey, Sean, do you want me to bring anybody else from your team in, or should I wait to the question and answer?
If you could bring in Chris Armstrong right now, that would be fantastic.
All right, just bear with me here. Oh, boy. And thank you for
I'm right there with you, Mayor, with the haircut. I need one. But what can you do? Is either, you know, my sister offered to cut it, but I was like, I'm going to wait it out.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
All right. And then, yeah, if you can bring in my other partners at the Q&A, that'd be great.
Okay, we'll wait. So the other ones, just so I'm clear, in the Q&A is going to be Cal and Andy?
That's right.
Okay, perfect.
Would it be easier to bring them in now and just keep them?
No, either way, whatever you guys want is fine with me.
Okay. And then let me know when you want me to start, because I'm going to share the presentation.
Everybody ready for him to go?
We're ready.
All right. All right. Here we go. Let's see if this works. All right. Okay. All right. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yep.
All right. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sean O'Brien. I'm from North Point Development. And first of all, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss our plan for Sugar Creek. We appreciate all of those who took the time to review our proposal. It's not quite as long as War and Peace, but this is a very large and exciting opportunity, and we wanted our proposal to be very detailed in what we intended to do and how we intended to do it. A little bit about myself. I recently joined North Point in November. Previously, however, I worked for 14 years at WIDA, where I ran the commercial lending department and the housing tax credit program throughout the state of Wisconsin. On a personal note, I am a Verona native. Both my wife and I attended school in Verona and graduated from VHS. And even though we live in Fitchburg now, we still spend a lot of time in Verona visiting the in-laws. And also, I spend a lot of time at the Verona Ice Arena, where I coach a couple of different youth hockey teams. I'm here tonight with my partners, Cal Schultz and Andy Dunke, as well as Chris Armstrong, who is the president of Avanti Properties. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to discuss how we came up with our plan. We think we have a really strong plan for the city, and hit on a few of the highlights. So the RFP requested a partnership with diverse resources and a successful track record. Well, I think the North Point Avanti team is really providing just that. North Point has a successful track record in affordable housing development, as well as historic adaptive reuse, historic preservation. And Avanti Properties has a really long track record of being a master developer, along with producing some really neat properties around the community. Upscale multifamily apartments, townhomes, mixed-use retail projects, and has a pretty significant portfolio. Can you all see my slideshow with the video on the side? You all see that?
No video.
Oh, okay, so you can see the slideshow, no problem?
Correct.
Okay, I apologize. My first time. So we feel like we're bringing this really strong partnership to the community. And one of the nice things about our partnership is that it's already established. And I think you can see that on the site plan, that we are an established team. We started working together to develop a neighborhood in Fitchburg called Uptown. Avanti is the master developer of that neighborhood. They're developing 200 of the 365 acres there, and they brought us in recently to bring affordable senior and workforce housing into the community. Actually, in April of 2020, we'd awarded North Point with just over $700,000 of state and federal 4% housing tax credits, which will allow us to build 126 units, which is very similar to the proposal that we have on the affordability side in our proposal that you will see today. One of the things I think is also really neat is even though we're two different firms, this partnership allows us to bring these buildings in this community online and make it look like it's the work of one developer. So we don't intend to have this partnership where we're developing separate buildings that look differently and kind of stand out. This is going to be one fully developed community where we expect great success. As we're establishing how do we want to come up with a plan for the city, we put together some basic principles and goals. Some of those principles started with creating social and physical environments that promote good health for all, as well as designing spaces to live, learn, work, and play that will attract not only households, but also customers into downtown Verona. We wanted our plan to consider the needs of the community and determine the most sensible and objective plan to deliver results. We really wanted to focus on a plan that was executable and had a high likelihood of success. Some of the goals to do that were we wanted to provide self-supporting housing options. So both the market rate apartments as well as the affordable are financially feasible on their own with resources that are available in the market, and we don't actually require any need for city financial assistance for the housing itself. We really wanted to integrate the new neighborhood with surrounding neighborhood, and to do this, we purposely kept all of the buildings at 3 stories or less. We thought that was very important, not to go anything taller than 3 stories. We really wanted circular access. We wanted to preserve the school. And then we really wanted to design spaces that were architecturally appealing and sustainable. We realized that our plan would provide long-term benefits and then most importantly be flexible for when we get community feedback. Now, Avanti is going to take the lead on the architectural. They've provided the communities with significantly architecturally unique buildings. And you can see that all of their buildings here are just, architecturally unique. They're different. Everything from a high-end mixed-use type project to an apartment only. They've used pitched roofs. They've used flat roofs. I would just highlight, the high-quality building materials that Avanti has used. And again, we're going to follow their lead as we develop. And both Avanti and North Point really put a focus on exterior living spaces just as much as we do interior living spaces. So these are just, some quick examples of the portfolio and types of things that we would like to bring into Verona. And this is just a big shot of all the different properties. You might have seen this on the Verona Press. They seem to hit the front page with these pictures week after week, which I think is pretty cool. But on here you'll see, the detail to the interior spaces as well as the exterior spaces. Both North Point and Avanti are firms that focus on energy efficient and sustainable design practices. Environmental and health impacts of development and products used, and infrastructure and buildings is extremely important to us. We've used solar in our buildings in the past, as well as green infrastructure as we talk about stormwater management. And really just wanted to touch base on the site plan. You've all seen the site plan. Our plan started with a really large park in the center. We call this Central Park. It's a 2-acre park. We thought this was an important amenity to bring to the community. I know Verona does have a lot of parks, but we felt like a park downtown made a lot of sense. And then we really were focused on establishing circular access to the park. So we wanted to extend Church Avenue all the way over to Legion Street. And as we did that, we were able to also create some additional parking here for the park sports courts. think about 25 or 30 spaces. But we also wanted to make sure that our plan brought in folks from Verona Avenue as well as access from Marietta Street, so we could really provide that circular space. As you will see, all of our buildings are brought up to the street, so we can activate the street space. The market rate apartments will be along Verona Avenue and Church Avenue, and then the affordable senior and townhomes will be on the southwest portion of the site. We do have some ideas for future use. And we are working with some adjoining landowners to make that happen, and we'll continue to work on that as we move forward. But one of the things that's unique about our plan is we were actually able to work with the owners of the Classic Tavern and get that site under contract. And so we were able to do that a couple of months ago, and so we're planning on bringing that redevelopment into part of this as well. We reached out to Old National Bank, told them about our plans. They're very excited about what we're doing. They want to be part of the redevelopment, and they have actually signed off on our concept review application that we intend to submit to the city in July. In fact, we were going to submit in June and be at concept review in July. A little bit more about Central Park. We're bringing amenities that we don't believe are currently offered in Verona. These include the pickleball courts. I know that there's a significant amount of tennis courts in Verona. A lot of those have pickleball lines drawn on, but we don't have any specific pickleball courts actually in the community. At least I'm not aware of any. And also we were looking at bringing in this sports court. This is an outdoor fitness sports court. There's another one in Janesville as far as Wisconsin goes. We know that it holds up in the Wisconsin winters. But there's hundreds of these throughout the country, and they offer really everyone in the community a place to come and exercise and stay healthy, but also a space of socialization and gathering. And I hesitate to say that we're intending to do a little bit of pickleball tourism, but pickleball courts on their own generate tournaments and bring people into downtown. They bring people to the community just as much as the fitness court would. And we also expect this space, as it's large enough, to do community events, host festivals, other types of things. I actually had been granted approval to use this logo for the Hometown Brewdown, but not necessarily saying that the Hometown Brewdown needs to move into this space, but it's a good example of the types of uses that this space can accommodate on a going forward basis. Another great example, actually, our partners Avanti hosts an annual back to school block party. This is shot, I believe, last year. It's in a neighborhood in Fitchburg. It's actually really close to my house. I attend it with my kids every year. But it's really a cool event that activates the neighborhood. It brings everybody out before school starts again, gets everyone together, and really activates the space and brings everybody together as a community. Just a couple of quick touch points on the housing components. The market rate components can be 2 buildings, 142 units. This will be built in phases. To the mayor's question, the first phase will be the one right up along Verona Avenue, with the second phase coming right after on Church Street. You can see that Avanti, brings really high quality exterior finishes to all the buildings that they do, along with top of line amenities. All of the properties that they currently own are highly occupied and doing very well. And North Point would be in charge of bringing the senior workforce housing, to the community. This project, 142 units, 110 will be senior, 32 workforce homes. All of those will be 3-bedroom. This is very similar to the application that was funded April 28th. It will target households that are primarily earning between 50 to 80% CMI. For example, a 2-person household earns $40,000 on the 50% side, all the way up to a 4-person household at 80% CMI is $80,000. So that will be our primary target market. And again, both the market rate and the senior are feasible without additional city assistance. It will be built in one project. We intend to apply to WIDA in December. If awarded, we can start construction late next year. I know you heard Ted talk about housing tax credits. I really appreciate him giving you kind of the 101. You will also probably hear tonight, both 9% and 4%. So we are actually going after a state and federal 4% application. So fundamentally, the difference between the two and I used to run the program at WIDA. So the difference between the two is that the 9% housing tax credit produces a significant amount of additional equity for the project than a 4% tax credit project would. So much so that most of the time a 4% project isn't financially feasible. 4% is also a federal resource along with the 9%, and a lot of states, including Wisconsin, realized that they were leaving a lot of federal resources on the table. So 3 years ago, they created a state housing tax credit program that would complement the federal 4%, and therefore more projects became financially feasible, and both programs have generated about 1,000 units per year over the last couple of years. Even though they're fundamentally pretty similar, except for the amount of equities, there are some programmatic differences or what sort of outcomes you would see between the two programs. And I think really the one that I just want to highlight here is just the amount of competition that there is between the two programs. The state and federal 4% competition funded 65% of applications last year in 2020, whereas the federal 9% tax credit competition is so competitive that in the general set aside, which a project in Verona would fall into most likely, only funded 22% of applications. So we're trying to target a resource that's more likely to move something forward on the Sugar Creek site. The other really nice thing about 4% is that because there's not as much equity, it requires more debt. More debt means more income, and more incomes mean more taxes for the city. The other kind of really interesting piece of all of this, the tax credit affordable housing, is that WIDA is currently changing all the rules, and they'll be coming out with a new plan here in a couple of weeks that will go into effect probably in June or July. Between the two programs, I would say that the 9% is much more sensitive to location-based points, whereas a 4% project is more sensitive to financial feasibility. So if WIDA decides to say that certain areas in the state are more competitive, that may or may not affect the competitiveness of bringing a 9% project to the Sugar Creek sites. That 9% is a very powerful tool. It is, very speculative. We actually intend to use the 9% for the classic Old National Bank site. We think that'll also kind of round out our affordable options that we're bringing into the city. But it also pushes that speculative risk onto the developers, where if we don't win tax credits, the 9%, then Old National and Classics remains as is, usable as the space that they currently are. So just moving and finally wrapping this up, our team is offering the city $1 million to the city to acquire the property. This money will be cash at closing. It's for the school and land use for housing development. Now, we're not asking for any resources for the housing themselves. We are asking for some sort of resource, whether it's TIF or something else, to help with some of the public improvements that I'm sure you'll hear throughout the night. Those would be the Sugar Creek demo, the Church Street extension, some parking lot improvements, and some other soft costs and management fees if we were to go through a pay-go type situation. Now, as we talk about long-term financial benefits to the city, one of the ideas we had was to extend TID 9 into Sugar Creek. This would, leave 22 years of possible TID on the table versus a new 27-year TID. But as you can see, our campus is going to produce almost $17 million of tax revenue over the remaining life of TID 9. If we were to go the route of a pay-go, we believe we can borrow funds at about 4.5%. That generates about $9.2 million of cash available for the city to do whatever they'd like, whether it's, participate in our project. You can go and add additional public uses to the park. You can, add more public infrastructure, acquire sites for future redevelopment, etc. We believe that, our project will significantly increase revenues and give you that flexibility. So just wrapping up, we believe that our plan kind of hits on all of your scoring criteria. We believe that we're going to bring exceptional architecture. We're going to maximize, the TIF district. We're going to provide a diverse range of housing everywhere between senior, market rate, and affordable. We're bringing significant private equity and investment, $13.5 million from the tax credits, $1 million purchase price to the city, and a manageable TIF request, and at least $4 million in private investment for the market rate units. We're going to build a beautiful 2-acre park with space for additional public parking and farmers market. We have a strong team, and we think that this is, the right vision for the future of Verona. But before I open up for any questions, just want to see if Chris had any comments he wanted to add.
Yeah, thanks everybody for having us tonight. Not a lot to add. I just wanted to mention on a personal level, I'm a Fitchburg resident, but have 3 kids in the Verona School District. 2 are in the high school right now, and 1 on the way. So I drive through Verona at least up until recently on a daily basis, and have just really am always thinking about the potential for a development like this, and think it will do very well, whoever you select. But I do think that our plan offers some unique advantages. Our architecture is a real important thing to Avanti. We spend a lot of time thinking about our buildings and how they interact with their surroundings and the streets, and making for a vibrant, active setting. So that's something that Avanti will definitely work on with this project. I think that it's important that we're going for the more highly awarded 4% tax credit. Our 2-acre park gives the city some flexibility in terms of whether it's our vision or something that the city wants to discuss expanding on that park area. And maybe most importantly, we're offering $1 million to acquire this property. So from a financial perspective, I think we're offering the city of Verona the best opportunity here. So with that, we can throw it out to questions.
So Sean, can you stop sharing your screen?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Did I do that? I did it. All right.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. Adam, would you be able to bring in Cal and Andy at this point?
Sure. Hold on 1 second.
While he's doing that, I have a quick clarification question, Sean. Your TIF 9 expansion projections don't include the classic site, right? Just the Sugar Creek campus itself?
The increment that we put onto that slide only includes the buildings that are going onto the Sugar Creek site. So if we were able to redevelop the classic and Old National Bank sites, that would be in addition to that slide.
I'll ask a question, I guess. Or, sorry, Katie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just real quick. Well, first off, I wanted to say that I appreciate your attention to a senior living detail. I believe that's something that's really important to support our aging population. But I also was wondering about the park space, the central park. Is that something that you intend to be managed by the city as a city property, or is that something that kind of spoke on the last presentation where it's like part private, part public, and it's managed by your management company?
We fully expect to donate the park to the city. As far as developing the park and bringing the improvements and infrastructure to the park, we plan on doing that. If the city would like us to, but that would be dedicated back to the city, which is also why we liked the spaces that we were putting in there, because we felt like they were low operating costs and can be well maintained through the Wisconsin seasons.
I'll ask quick questions now, if I could. What about the people often come to me and want more commercial on Verona Avenue, and I know I've heard from some developers that they think maybe commercials are getting a little overbuilt in Verona, but I'm wondering, what about the viability of putting a little bit, that one bit that with the apartments that is on fronts on Verona Avenue? Could that be a mixed use? Would that be viable for a commercial kind of zoning?
Well, I'm going to let Chris jump in, but I just want to add a couple of things to that, Mayor. One, we believe that there is a great mixed-use redevelopment opportunity at the Classic site as well as the Old National Bank. And we're going to work really hard with the adjoining parcel owners to the Sugar Creek site, the corner of Marietta and Verona Avenue, as well as the sites that are to the west, to also bring in additional mixed-use retail options. But I'll let kind of Chris answer the question as opposed to that building.
Yeah, no, that mixed-use apartments is definitely something we have some experience with. Sequoia Commons project and a couple of projects in Pittsburgh where we have some of that first-floor retail. It's something that we could assess. I tend to agree with some of the comments you've gotten, that there's quite a bit of retail on Verona Avenue already. But that's something that we could take a look at.
And then I guess my other quick question is, would it be possible to flip where some of the apartments are with the townhomes, so that the people who, for the adjoining neighborhood, it was a little more gentle density with the townhomes, since they're 2 stories, and then have the 3 stories kind of towards Legion Street? Is that a possibility?
So are you referencing basically, the 2 senior buildings that are along Church Street, bringing those back, to the very south and bringing up the townhomes? And so as you come through Church Street, you see the townhomes, and then you drive back to the senior buildings. Is that how you're proposing?
Yeah.
I definitely think that's doable. We want to keep the affordable units all in the same parcel because it will be one owned by one LLC, one project. But flipping those can definitely be done. The only reason why we had put the senior along Church Ave is because we thought that the senior, could get a lot of use out of the pickleball courts. It's a great amenity for the, that type of apartment complex. But, flipping them around would definitely work as well.
Thanks. And this is more of just a comment, I guess, for city staff. I think that, if Church Street was connected, we want it to be a complete street with traffic calming and very pedestrian and bike friendly for people who want to walk or bike. And just to, I guess, not encourage people to drive fast through residential neighborhoods. But that was more for city staff.
What other questions are there?
Again, I just really appreciate the time and effort that you're all putting in. I mean, these are some interesting times. We definitely thought about this for a very long time. Hopefully that comes through with our plan. And we're open to answer any other additional questions that you might have after this, if you don't have any at the moment.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank
Anything
you.
else before they go? Last chance? Nope. All right.
Getting demoted.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Exactly. Oh, boy. Okay, so once again, we're running ahead of schedule, so does everybody want to keep going? Anybody need a break or anything before we get into the last 2?
Adam, this is Steve. I have a question about density. The density that we're looking at here ranges from 402 units down to 157 units. And, that's quite a disparity. And so I'm wondering what do our statutes call for with respect to this?
So our current ordinance, which is being redone right now, our current ordinance, the multifamily zoning district allows up to 12 dwelling units per acre. So this site is approximately 12 acres. So 12 times 12 is 144. Typically, when we have a mixed-use project or a multifamily project, we typically have that as what's called a planned unit development. Planned unit development is a process where developers can have exemptions to the zoning ordinance, and many times that includes density. Parking has been a big one. We have some pretty significant parking standards currently, which are being looked at. And in the past, also, we've looked at building heights as well. Those are the top three that you typically see as part of apartment projects. But as part of that planned unit development process, exemptions can be kind of granted from what the code allows or requires.
So I was going to ask a similar question. What other examples of higher than that, and how do they compare to some of these?
During the course of the last two presentations, I can start pulling some that information. I have some guesses off the top of my head, but I know we've looked at this for other projects. So if you can maybe wait to that question until after the last one, I will dig for that while we're listening to these last two.
Well, I can tell you that McKenzie, who did the apartments across the street from me here on Heineken Drive, their density is on those apartments is considerable, and it was a difficult time when that occurred, and people didn't want, at least in my opinion, people didn't want that high a density.
Well, the next person up is John McKenzie. So would you like me to bring him into the meeting?
You'll remember me.
Any more questions for me before I bring John in?
He's proposing 318 units, all right?
So I'll bring John in as these two are going. I'll start kind of pulling in information. Hey, John, can you hear us?
I can. Can you see me?
We can. So I've got some other people on your team. Do you want me to bring them in, or do you want me to wait?
Probably best in the question and answer session. We can do it that way.
Then we will wait, and you started your presentation, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. First of all, I want to say all of the finalists that you have here, all four parties are really good developers. I don't think there's a bad choice in there. They're all good ones, and I'm not going to criticize any of them. What I want to do here is try to convince you about why we're the best choice. And I'm going to start off with talking about what's different about us. One thing that's very different about us is we're extremely focused. We're focused regionally. About 25 years ago, we developed the Blackhawk subdivision on the west side. We live there. My son is building a house there with his wife, Sarah. My parents live there. Every development I've done since then is within 8 miles of where we live. The reason for that is I am convinced that I do things better when they're close to home. The further out you get, the more you diffuse your energy. So we stay focused on west side of Madison. We don't even go to the east side, Verona, and Middleton. Second thing is we do 1 or 2 things at a time. We don't spread ourselves out. I know a lot of people are good at multitasking. I don't know how I am at that, but I know I'm really good at single tasking. We really get focused on what we do, so we do it right. The third thing I want to say is that if you pick the McKenzie Apartment Company, you're not going to get a staffer with a title. You're going to get John and Jack McKenzie. We will stay on that site until it's done, and it's done right. Steve, I'm looking forward to the conversation with you about density because I think there's some very good reasons for it. What we're offering are 226 market rate apartments 92 affordable apartments, a community pool, a multi-use park, a tot lot with a playground, a revitalized New Century School with an idea I'm really excited about, and I hope you are too. To finance this, I anticipate $9.5 million in cash. We don't have any investors, that's our own money. $36 million in conventional financing and a modest $2 million TIF. The TIF request didn't come through clearly in the original proposal, but that's an important part of our request, and it's relatively small. I want to compliment the people that put this package together, the RFP, particularly that you spent a significant amount of time engaging the public and what the public wanted. And you made it very clear in the package, in the guidelines, just what that was. And so instead of looking at this in terms of what we wanted to see, we decided to go at the site plan in terms of what the public wanted to see. And I'm very pleased to say we're the only proponent here that checks off all the boxes. Okay, going to the site plan, and we'll talk about the apartments first. You see in pink, we have the market rate apartments, and in tan, we have the affordable apartments. When you look at the layout, the first thing you'll notice is that we've taken the thin ends of the buildings up against the adjacent properties, and we've taken the mass back. So it lowers the impact next to the adjacent properties. Up in the upper right-hand corner of your plan, you'll notice we have a ample parking area right on Verona Avenue that is convenient for drop-offs for the pool, accessing the community center building, which we'll talk about, and the playground. You'll also notice some red lines with arrows. We noted in the public input phase that people wanted to see some outdoor exercise stations and a pathway through the project. And those red lines are where we would anticipate stacking various outdoor exercise equipment. The market rate apartments would be developed by the McKenzie Apartment Company. We have a fantastic reputation. We encourage people to ask around about us. Residents are very happy with where we live. Steve, I think you would agree, Sienna Ridge has turned out great. We get wonderful feedback from it. Despite the initial concern, it fits in beautifully to the neighborhood.
It does. I can attest to that. And,
okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And we also fit well within the community because we try to be really responsive to what the community wants. We won't always agree on everything, but we try. We're very well known for developing very upscale, amenity-driven properties that add value to what's around them. And you don't have to take my, and I think Steve appreciates your comment. We fit very well in with the neighborhood. But in 2019, J. Turner Research, which is a big research outfit based in Texas and works analyzing the multifamily industry, they reviewed 115,000 projects throughout the United States for online reputation. McKenzie Apartment Company properties got 4 properties in the top 1% in the nation, and 1 property, the one we just most recently completed, which is in Madison but has a Verona address, was rated 36th in the country out of 115,000. That is the highest rating in the state of Wisconsin, and nobody else is even close. We understood in your guidelines that you wanted to see an affordable housing component. We don't do that, so we look for who we think is the best in the business. Stonehouse development is a premier development of multifamily housing using Section 42 tax credits and other credits. I am really impressed with the architecture. I've seen a number of projects that they've done. When you look through their portfolio, the attention to design is fantastic. If you go through their properties, you will notice the quality of management and attention to detail there. I think the highest compliment I can give them as a market rate builder is I can't tell the difference between what they do and market rate. And to back that up, they've had multiple development awards over the last 20 years. Now, the highlight of our amenity package here is this fantastic community pool. It's a 6-lane pool with a diving end and a building with facilities, changing rooms, restrooms, showers, and that sort of thing. We initially, when we looked at responding to this package, just didn't see taking on that. But we've got 2 Verona graduates in our family. My son Jack graduated from Verona High School. His wife Sarah grew up in the Cross Country Heights neighborhood. And when we went through with Sarah, she said growing up in Verona, the one thing she really missed and her friends missed was a community pool to go to. I also would note that in the public input phase, that was the highest desired amenity. It just kept coming up. And we're the only developer to propose a pool, which I think is significant. A centrally located community pool like this will infuse energy, family fun, create a healthy option, be competitive swim meets, and a social hub in the heart center of Verona. And I think it's really exciting. We're offering a multi-use park with a architecturally attractive bandstand and then a lawn area. The bandstand provides a venue for concerts and theater. The lawn area, people can stack out on the lawn. It's also a very versatile space that could be used for a farmer's market or any number of other community events. We're offering a tot lot and playground with the standard kids stuff, climbing opportunities and swings and that sort of thing for healthy exercise. Finally, to the New Century School. This was, I think, a challenge for everybody. We're absolutely committed to preserving the historic importance of this structure. So we will preserve it. I agree, probably tax credits is not really a viable way to go, but we can indeed restrict it or approach it in any number of ways that we can assure you that we're going to protect the facade. The thing that really strikes me here is that it doesn't have retail potential. It's not very good for adaptive use for an office. We don't really see it fitting into the apartments very comfortably. Would have access issues for seniors. But what it's perfectly suited for is something that I've been working on for the last 2 years. And that is, as we're in the building business, we build our own properties, we're aware of an acute shortage of skilled labor on the job. It's getting worse because the older people are retiring and we don't have enough young people coming onto the jobs. A lot of people are going to college, building up debt. They've been encouraged that way. There is a fantastic opportunity in the trades. There is a need from business. There's a need for jobs for kids. So anyway, for the last 2 years, I've been working with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Dane County and the Madison Area Builders Association, of which we've been a member for nearly 30 years. Both groups now have passed resolutions that they want to work together to build or readapt one of these facilities. We've been actively looking. We have initially considered a site in Sun Prairie at the McKenzie Family Boys and Girls Club. I think this is a better opportunity. I presented this to Michael Johnson, who's the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, and Chad Lawler, who put it in front of the Skilled Trades Committee this morning. They both endorsed the idea. They think it's a great idea. This was a school anyway. So I think there's an opportunity for us to do something that's really significant, important for business. We've got MABA with the training and the jobs on one end, the Boys and Girls Club with kids. This would be open to other kids in Verona and the area. So I think this is just a huge win-win and a great way to put this school to use again. So finally, I want to say appreciate very much having had the opportunity to respond. We've really taken this to heart. We really want this to happen for many reasons. I hope you pick us. If you do, we're ready to move forward, and a project I think that can be a game changer for Verona. Thank you. Should we go back to site plan?
If you could just stop sharing the screen for a little bit so we can see everyone's faces. There we go. And we can go back to the site plan if needed.
Yeah.
All right.
John, this is Steve. When you showed that picture of the stone apartments, how big, how tall are they?
All of the apartments that we have planned on this property are no more than, they're 3 stories.
3 stories.
Yeah. So, but I think we can probably bring in Rich Arneson and have him respond to any questions specifically about Stonehouse. But ours are 3 stories as well.
Okay.
Do you want me to bring him in?
Well, Stonehouse is probably, their building is 3 to 4, but 3 by the adjacent properties. I think ours are all 3, aren't they? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is that Jack sitting next to you?
Yeah.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Good. You been mowing your lawn yet this year?
I have, yeah. Surprised you haven't seen me.
I have a question. I noticed that for the market rate apartments, you mainly had studio 1 and 2 bedrooms. Was there any thought of putting in any 3-bedroom market rate, or are you pretty much just planning on sticking up to a 2-bedroom?
No, I mean, that's certainly, we'd be open to that. We tend to have more studio 1 and 2 demands. We built 3 bedrooms. So no, I mean, this is an early element to looking at this, and there would be a lot of market analysis and community engagement, that sort of thing. We want to do what the market wants. Who wants to get into density?
Where was it? I understand the location of the parking lot for the pool on Verona, I'm sure is, a traffic mitigation concern, but it's a large sea of parking that next to a whole lot of things that are not going to be redeveloped, and the pool, which is empty 9 months, we're in Wisconsin, 9 months out of the year. So I'm just concerned that's going to be a big dead zone within that corridor that will never kind of allow for that walkability for downtown to expand in the future.
Well, somewhere you're going to need parking for the park, for the pool, and for what we do with the New Century School. We're not married to having it up on Verona Avenue. It could be somewhere else. It just, our initial site planning seemed to lay out effectively. It's a good drop-off, convenient drop-off for the pool. But somehow you need to integrate parking in there. And if you have a farmer's market, you certainly want to have parking available, right? And concerts and theater and all that kind of stuff. So I don't look at it as a dead zone. You're going to have some activity, hopefully, in the park long through the season, and certainly the New Century School. We expect there to be a lot of activity with kids and Madison area builders, people, training people, and so forth.
the future mixed use that you had kind of noted in an adjacent property, do you vision that as being like a 3-story type building with, you know, like retail or whatever on the bottom and more apartments on top, or what are you kind of envisioning for that?
Right now, it's just a blob. We just, it looks terrible. I think Michael's is going to have to come to some reason about value for it to work economically for somebody. I will tell you, we're often encouraged, I guess more by Madison than any other community, to try to do retail underneath apartments. I've never seen it work very well. Where it's been done more in outlying areas, it's often a vacant space. It's awkward. It's awkward for management. So I'd rather have, if you're going to do a commercial space, do it separate. But I agree with the other comments that were made. There's an awful lot of commercial space right now. The retail space is in transition, big time. A lot of what we have known and grew up with, I'm older than you, but what I grew up with is really gone and going. And with this corona situation, I don't think we know what's going to happen with restaurants and hospitality and all this kind of stuff. Adjacent projects that are proposing a lot of commercial and a lot of hospitality, I don't know. We'll have to see. But right now, I would say, I put mixed use there just because it gives the option to be many, many different things.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Steve, do you want to ask me about density?
Actually, no. I think density is something I would like to discuss with the CDA and come to an agreement. But how much density is too much density? Adam gave us the what the ordinance is, and if this is consistent with the ordinance, that's one thing. But going over the density is something that I'm not real keen on.
Okay. I just want to leave you with a thought, if I can, a couple thoughts on density. First of all, the density is what creates the economic value for all of these amenities that we're providing. I mean, we're doing a whole lot here that can't be done without a significant contribution of money. So it creates economic value. Second thing is, in the guidelines, Verona was looking for a positive financial impact. The more units you have, the more property taxes are generated. So there's significant economic benefit to having more density. There's an environmental argument for it, because the more people there are close to jobs and the places that they go, the more efficient it is, the less traffic there is, the less, The other thing is, it provides customers for area businesses. It helps them become much more viable. And if you recall, when we had this conflict, I think it's fair to say, over Sienna Ridge, I spent quite a bit of time presenting extensive studies that have been done by the Sierra Club, by Duke University, and by Urban Land Institutes, which I'm happy to regenerate. But there's always this consistent argument about density, that it's going to add to traffic impact significantly, it's going to cause crime, and it's going to lower property values. All of these multiple studies have proved that that's absolutely not true. And if you look at Sienna Ridge and how that's fit into the neighborhood, we're very, very proud of that property. I encourage everybody to drive through, get a feel for it, and really see what you think.
Yeah. No, it's been very responsive to the community.
Okay. All right.
I still have a problem with density.
I understand, Steve.
But I know you have to make, you have to have the revenue generated in order to deal with the amenities that you're talking about. So I appreciate that, John.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
I'm just going to ask one quick question. This is more for Mr. Sayer again. But I assume the community pool, that's going to be eventually run by the city, right? That's the proposal?
I would assume that's the case. John, is that the case?
Yeah, our plan would be to turn over all of this public area, and I think we've got quite a bit of green space and public facilities. We probably have 5 acres of it, which pushes the density a bit on the other. But no, the idea would be to turn it all over to either the city, certainly the parks. I imagine the city could decide they want some other operating entity for the pool. That's done all over, where you have a swim club, so to speak, where people pay. I can't give you an operating budget for it because I've never run a community pool, but we have 6 pools that are our apartment communities, and we hire a company to, maintain the pool. And it isn't overwhelming, something that can be certainly handled. Different ways of doing these things. You can do them with an endowment where people go out and raise a bunch of money and you invest it, and that pays the ongoing operating expenses, or your membership fee, or other ways you can do it.
Yeah, I guess so. To direct it back to Mr. Sayre, I know I think the city has a pretty good idea of how to run a public park, but I know we haven't run a community pool, and I would like to see, what a budget for that might look like, both with, potential maintenance and replacement costs and just year to year running it. I'm not saying, we should or shouldn't do the pool, but I know a lot of people are interested in it, and I think it would be something we'd want to just see the cost so we could go in with our eyes open, especially we don't know what our budget's going to look like next year.
Right.
Yeah, we have some of those numbers already. So I think we did a phase 1 study on this a couple of years ago. As part of that, I know Casey Dudley, the recreation director, Dave Walker, Catherine, they went out and looked at a bunch of the local facilities, and then we did collect a lot of information. It might be a year or 2 old, but we do have those budget numbers, and we also have some of those replacement costs as well. So we can pull it together pretty quick whenever you want it.
Thanks.
Any more questions? I'm seeing the heads nodding no, so I'll take that as a no. All right. Well, thank you, John. Anything you want to say in closing?
No, I think we're just very excited. I think this could add a lot to Verona, and as I said before, you get Jack and I there every day to make it right.
All right. Well, thanks for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ready for the last one?
Sure.
Last one is Steve Brown Apartments. So I'm going to find Matt. Oop. Thank you for raising your hand, Matt.
You folks hear me?
We can hear you. Do you want me to bring anyone else from your team into this right now, or should we wait?
Yeah, would you mind bringing Dan Seeley and Scott Watson in, please?
Sure. Just give me 1 second here. Right.
Promoted to panelist. That's fun.
Scott is here. I'm just waiting for his video and his microphone. Anyone else, Matt, or just these two?
I think that should be good for now.
Okay. It's all yours.
All right, well, let's see if I can share my screen here. It's my first public meeting with Zoom, so see how this goes. Can you see my screen?
You do.
All right.
You got to hit the share button and then pick the one you want to share, and then hit the blue share again. I think it's blue. if you've got two monitors going.
I just have one.
Oh,
Let
work.
me see if I have to close out of this. Now, what did you want me to do?
Yeah, hit the green share button in the middle, and then it should pop up a little rectangle box, and then
Oh, sure.
yep, and then you gotta click the one you want, and then hit I think a blue share button in the right corner of that box. There you go.
All right. Can you all see me now?
Yes.
Great. Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Matt Meyer. I'm with the Alexander Company. And on behalf of our team, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. We've teamed with Steve Brown Apartments to bring this proposal forward to the city of Verona. Hopefully, you've all had some time to see our submittal where we've showed examples of our prior work, because I wanted to spend most of our time going through the proposal at hand. So just to briefly introduce our team, Steve Brown has a successful track record of developing condo quality market rate apartment communities combined with vibrant neighborhood retail amenities. And the Alexander Company specializes in adaptive reuse of historic buildings and the development of affordable workforce housing. As local owner-operators, both companies build for the long term for community investment and property success. We've combined our unique strengths to provide what we think is the best possible outcome for the city of Verona. Now, our team is supported by Vanderwall Associates, Becker Associates, and Engineered Construction, which are all local firms with a wealth of knowledge in the community. And each of our team members are local and have experience working in Verona and have staff members that live here. The team sees this project not simply as a development. We're not just building apartments. We see this as an opportunity to partner with Verona to create a new signature addition to your downtown. And this focus led to the vision of a multi-generational, pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use community hub, and really centered on a community amenity space and restored historic schoolhouse. And we think that this new addition to the community will facilitate community activities, diverse housing, sustainable development, and a strong tax base. This is our overall site plan. You'll see that the layout of the public street network was carefully considered to provide what we think is the best framework for the neighborhood long-term while maximizing connectivity. It provides connections to Industrial Drive to the south and future connectivity to West Verona Avenue. Church Street is connected with Legion Street, but with a jog that we feel will reduce traffic and traffic speed and enhance the pedestrian environment. The overall plan creates a front-facing public use that is highly visible along Verona Avenue. And these include the civic space, the historic school, and the mixed-use retail center at the corner of Verona Avenue. And we believe that these three uses together will create a synergy that's unique to our proposal. The Civic Plaza and activity space is envisioned for the public. And it can really only be designed after significant public input and discussion with city officials. So this rendering is really just a concept at this point, but we would see the Civic Plaza as generating as a gathering space that will become the heart of the community and connecting the public with activities, exercise, and outdoor recreation. We see potential activities there, including a farmer's market, art carts, holiday lights, outdoor movies, music, yoga, and other uses that encourage community interaction. We didn't want to dictate the uses, the physical improvements, but you know, that could include a community pool. It could include pickleball courts, a band shell, or even a skating rink. Really, whatever the community decides is the ultimate programming. It will be highly visible from Verona Avenue in this location and help draw the public into this unique asset. As stated previously, the Alexander Company has a long track record in redeveloping historic buildings, and in particular historic schools. Locally, this includes the Longfellow School in downtown Madison, but we've done multiple schools across the country. We've successfully renovated more than 100 historic buildings in accordance with National Park Service standards. So we understand that that school is part of the historic fabric of your community, and that it must be properly restored. In terms of uses, our first approach is to explore with the community whether there's a viable public or quasi-public use for the building. Potential examples that come to mind could be a children's museum, a community center, a warming hut for outdoor skating, or perhaps a headquarters for a nonprofit. In the event a viable public use is not identified, then we would proceed with renovating the building for private uses that could include maker space, office uses, private amenity space for the apartments, or even residential. We converted a lot of historic buildings into residential. In any case, we would seek to list the building on the National Register, and we'd retain as many of the historic character features of the building as possible to preserve them for future generations. The mixed-use center anchors the corner of West Verona Avenue and Marietta Street, and it really unlocks an extension of the downtown, linking the community space to that existing infrastructure. This building would provide 20 market rate urban loft style apartments above 10,000 square feet of walkable neighborhood serving retail. Just off the plaza, it would provide retail and dining with integrated seating areas on the ground floor. And other potential uses could include a boutique retail, ice cream, bakery, fitness center, or a coffee shop. And this type of use sometimes can be seen as a loss leader, really from a developer standpoint, but it's also a critical amenity for the neighborhood, in our opinion. So it'll activate that street corner while providing synergies with the public plaza and the historic school reuse, and act as a draw for the neighborhood in downtown. It's worth noting that Steve Brown Apartments already owns that corner, so they're in a unique position to provide this important amenity for Verona. In addition to the mixed-use building, Steve Brown would construct 3 market-rate apartment buildings with market-leading aesthetics and quality. The current programming for these buildings includes 112 residential units from 1 to 3 bedrooms in size. And the quality of the unit finishes will be more similar to a high-end condo than a typical apartment. If you haven't seen Steve Brown's work, they do really nice work, and these buildings would be top quality. They would feature underground parking and potential amenities, including rooftop patios, bike repair, fitness studio, dog wash, and a community room. As far as the affordable component, we believe that quality workforce housing is vitally important for Verona and its employers to attract employees really at all pay levels. and it's been a struggle really with rising construction costs. Rents have risen much higher than wages, and that's created what a lot of people believe is an affordable housing crisis nationally, and certainly that's true in Dane County. It was good to see that Verona understands this, and that you called this out in your RFP, to have a variety of housing types and a variety of affordable price points. With senior housing already provided on an adjacent site, we're proposing to provide both market rate and affordable workforce housing to round out the housing options in the neighborhood. Now, the only way to provide viable affordable housing is through the use of tax credits, and we've heard on that from other presenters, but the federal credits allow a source of equity that offsets debt, so we can afford to reduce rents for moderate income tenants. In this case, we're proposing to provide 104 residential units affordable to those earning between a maximum of 50 and 70% of the county median income. So this means the maximum income ranges from $35,000 for a 50% one-bedroom tenant to $63,000 for a two-bedroom unit. It ranges by family size. And this will really cater to your creative class, your service workers, your bartenders, your firemen, administrative assistants, school teachers, or those just starting out in their careers. And it's a big deal for them. You know, as an example, one bedroom in this affordable component of the project would rent for about $975. And that compares to a one bedroom market rate unit that would rent for $1,300 or more. So while these units would be inexpensive, they'll still be high quality with attractive finishes and amenities. The common amenities for the affordable component would include a clubhouse with a community room, outdoor patio, fitness room, and on-site management offices. And one of the really nice features would be the private tuck-under garages with direct connections to the individual units. So if you can imagine pulling into your garage and taking your groceries directly into your kitchen, this is what these buildings provide. You can't see it real well in the rendering. So we'll provide quality, affordable housing, allowing your service sector workers in your downtown and others working nearby to remain living in Verona. And as you've heard, these credits from WIDA, it's a competitive application process. And I think some are assuming a 9% credit program, which provides more equity to the deal. But that's an extremely competitive program. Our proposal assumes the 4% credit, which is much more likely to be awarded. In terms of financial viability and the economics, we've estimated a total investment of approximately $54 million. And this includes approximately $45 million in private debt and equity. Of the total $8.9 million in public sector funds, $5.1 million is budgeted for civic space development and infrastructure. Now we have a much more robust infrastructure plan and civic space than I think some of the proposals, and this is subject to change. So, you know, while we collaborate with the community on the scope and collectively work to provide the best value for the public investment, you can decide whether you want to scale that back and spend less if you wish. But we're proposing that those public costs, the infrastructure and the amenity spaces, is paid for with city funds, including the potential use of park fees and tax incremental financing. The remaining 3.8 million is anticipated to support the private development, and in particular, the affordable housing component. With similar cost and lower rents than market rate apartments, there's typically a gap in affordable housing. And it's not easy to get these deals done. And it normally requires a public-private partnership. And while TIF funding may be needed to help close that gap, we'd also anticipate other gap funding sources to reduce the TIF required. This would include applying for subordinate loans through WIDA or through Dane County and other sources. There's also pending legislation right now at the federal level that could significantly reduce the amount of gap financing required. But I noticed that other proposals already assume many of these competitive funding sources are procured, which accounts for much of the delta in the economics between proposals. And in the end, we all have the same toolbox of potential gap fillers. We're just showing that gap as a gross number until those funds are actually secured. It's worth noting that our estimates of tax increment indicate that the total public infrastructure and private gap could be funded by TIF, even though that is unlikely. So in summary, I guess first and foremost, we understand that this isn't simply about building apartments. This is about the residents of Verona and creating a sense of place on the west end of your downtown. We believe our plan accomplishes this by creating new civic gathering space and a destination along Verona Avenue. And through our team's ownership of the corner, our proposal is the only one to include retail, activating that street front with new places to shop and live and dine. It respects and restores a piece of Verona's history with the adaptive reuse of Verona's first graded school, and it adds much needed affordable housing along with the market rate component and the existing senior housing will provide a diverse mix of housing for all ages and incomes. It'll be sustainable, meeting green built home standards on a walkable urban infill site. And perhaps more importantly, if Verona wants to think big with us, it'll become a catalyst for more as Verona continues to revitalize its downtown. So with that, I'd like to say that we're really excited to work on this opportunity, and we look forward to a strong public-private partnership with the city of Verona. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I'll go. I really like the commercial component on Main, or I should say on Verona Avenue. I think for when it comes down to it, my two biggest priorities are the public space and, kind of kicking off commercial development, whether that's direct, which is great. And I understand you guys have an advantage because you own an additional parcel. I guess my two questions, though, are regarding, I know you said there could be multiple uses for this spot that's slated as a children's museum. However, I'm wondering, do you think a children's museum is really viable right now? Because I'm reading about like the big museums, and it sounds like they're struggling. I would love a children's museum in Verona. I'm just kind of curious how viable you think it would be, considering the current situation.
You guys mind if I take this one?
Go ahead, Dan.
All right. First of all, thanks everybody for the opportunity tonight. And like Matt said, I just want to start by saying we are really, really excited about this. I think Matt just gave you one excited, and it's probably a good thing he did the presentation because I would have been coming through the screen trying to communicate how excited we are about this. We don't see this as an apartment project or a housing project. That's a major component of it, don't get me wrong, but as other developers have said, everybody in the room tonight is great. We're all good at what we do. I think we're the best, but I'm sure everybody else thinks are the best too. So we're not really, the housing is necessary. We're excited about that. It needs it. Verona needs it. The project needs it. But we're excited about this project because it has the opportunity and the chance to be iconic for Verona, and we want to be a part of that. The housing is going to get us there, but the rest of it is what's so fascinating and so thrilling about being a part of this. So the Children's Museum, yeah, I do think a Children's Museum is viable. I mean, present situation aside, everything is crazy right now, and it's tough to make any predictions on what's viable, what's not viable. So I think we sort of have to take the current situation and set it aside and work with the information that we have and the data that we have and the history that we have, as opposed to really trying to forecast a lot going forward and what's going to happen into the future. The Children's Museum, Black Earth is a community that's smaller than Verona, and could be looked at as a model of a successful children's museum that was started by a couple on a road trip that were visiting another small children's museum, I think in northern Michigan or in northern Wisconsin. And they got this idea in their head that, why don't we have one of these in Black Earth? So they put it together. They turned it into a nonprofit. They have a board that helps them operate it. And I think it's been a rousing success. Similarly, Baraboo has a children's museum, another small community in the region that's currently hosting a successful children's museum. I'm in Sun Prairie. I'm not a Verona native, unlike a number of members of our team. But Sun Prairie is talking about bringing a children's museum to town. We have an organized group right now that's formed a 501(c) that's currently in the early phases of identifying a space and programming for a children's museum. So I do think it's viable. There are a lot of support structures out there for these things. There's the Association of Children's Museums that provides support and professional development and resources, et cetera, to over 400 children's museums throughout the country. You know, and without having a use defined or figured out already, you know, all that could be initiated by the community, as it has been in other locations. Maybe it's something that's privately driven, maybe it's something that's publicly driven. But we found it super exciting and sort of inspiring, and thinking about the way it could interact with the public space, and the retail supports the Children's Museum or whatever the use becomes in the New Century School. And the New Century School supports the retail, supports the community space. Again, that's the exciting part about this project. And the housing just feeds into all of that. So we found that use or that concept inspiring. And if there's a way to do it, and if that's the way we go, I think everybody else is going to get on board too. I do think it's viable, short answer. Present situation aside, again, without being able to predict the future, I think other small communities have shown that it's viable. I think there's a trend here, and I think that Verona can get on board and bring something really exciting and a potential economic driver to their community.
Thanks. And then I guess my second quick question is, how much flexibility is there on the TIF request? Because like I said, there's a lot of things I like about this proposal, but like, I'm not anti-TIF. I'm a TIF skeptic, I would say. And so like when I see that kind of amount in a TIF, I kind of feel like we need to show the public we're getting something really good, or it needs to be a smaller amount. And from my understanding of the presentation is it could be a smaller amount. Could you maybe just go over that again for me?
I'll touch on it very briefly, and then I'll kick to either Matt or Scott, because they're going to be much more, much better to answer this question. But Matt touched on it a little bit throughout the presentation that, look, what we're showing you guys is sort of the vision that we're excited about, and it's big and it's ambitious, and there's going to be some costs associated with it in order to get to where we're showing you can go. But this whole thing is going to be a partnership, right? So we're going to be working hand in hand. We'll be flexible, we'll be nimble. We're going to have conversations with the public. We're going to have conversations with the community and with the decision-making bodies. And we're going to find out what that final product looks like and what that final product is going to cost. A lot of the TIF that we're talking about, you know, you've seen similar numbers from other presenters in the 2 million range, whatever that might be, for city infrastructure, demolition costs, and so on and so forth. The stuff that's over and above that is really for our vision and for what we're showing you. And we think it's a realistic number for what we're providing, but it's a scalable number based on the direction that we choose to go. Similarly, for the housing component, the affordable component that Matt talked about, we only wanted to account for funds that we felt were realistic or likely. We didn't want to count on dollars that we didn't necessarily have any control over, and so we wanted to be cautious in our financial modeling for the housing component. And again, Scott, Matt, whichever one of you wants to raise your hand and pick up on that, I'll let you close it out.
Yeah, I think the difference is really that we didn't assume that other sources of funds would be approved. We think they will be approved. We have the same chance of applying and successfully getting awarded funds, subordinate funding from WIDA or from Dane County or other sources as anyone else. We just presented that total gap, knowing that we would work together with the city to target those other sources of funding. And there are ramifications for certain types of funding. It can change the dynamic of the project to meet the requirements. For example, some of the sources of funds that we could pursue require a much lower income targeting, and we can discuss that with the community and see if that's the target that we want to go after. So there's definitely opportunities there. We just wanted to have the opportunity to discuss that with the city before assuming that those funds were going to be utilized.
Thank you.
Scott, did you want to elaborate, or you think we're covered it?
I think you covered it. I would just reiterate something that Matt said earlier in the presentation, which is that of the total gap that we're showing, again, more than half of it is city infrastructure and public space development per the vision that Dan described, which is scalable. The balance is the optimistic or pessimistic, whichever way you want to look at it, gap on the affordable housing. There's a very small component of gap, $750,000 or so, related to the retail piece, the commercial development. And that is, well, we talked about the viability of retail going forward. And I don't think that there's a problem that Verona has too much retail. I think that it's the layout of the retail. A lot of it is located in single family homes up and down Verona Avenue and Main Street. And we really want to activate that corner and that site with on-site retail and on-site options for dining and shopping and so forth. So that is a loss leader, as Matt alluded to. And so there's a small component of that, but that can be, we can massage that as well. And I also want to reiterate that the increment that we are projecting to generate is well supportive of the gap, the total gap.
And Scott's a Verona resident, which he failed to mention.
I'm a townie.
Thank you, Mayor.
Other questions? Can I ask one? Is that okay? Okay. So you've got the total TIF request in there. Say you are not awarded those tax credits. What is your intention then with those properties that were identified as affordable? Would they become market rate, or is that built into your TIF request? Then it sounds like the city would be, in essence, subsidizing those, if you kind of get where I'm going with that. How would you handle that if you were not awarded tax credits? Would you assume the TIF to cover that expense to make those affordable, or how would that be done?
Yeah, I mean, the tax credits are a huge component of making projects economically viable for affordable housing. So, potentially it could be a higher level of affordability, 80 to 120% of the county median income with some TIF support. I think that, you know, we would be very careful to apply for the credits to where we think that we have a realistic shot, and there's, you know, there's a scoring criteria that you go through to compete for those credits, so that can be adjusted. You never know for sure whether you're going to get credits because you don't know what the competing proposals are going to commit to. But you can get a pretty good sense, so I'd feel good about getting it done with a successful award.
Any more questions? Okay. Any parting comments from this development team?
I think I told you we were excited about this. We're really excited about the opportunity. Again, this is the opportunity. This is a shot to have something iconic, to really change the fabric of downtown Verona. To have a 12-acre infill site for redevelopment is not an opportunity that comes along very often, and we're shooting big. We're being aspirational, and I think we're hoping that you guys are going to be aspirational too. And we can scale that. We'll figure out where we're going together, but 12 acres urban infill doesn't come along very often, and we really want to knock this out of the park, and we really want to be a part of that. And so we thank you for the time. Thank you for the questions, and look forward to the deliberation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys.
Relegate us.
I'm getting there. Okay, I think that's everyone. So on the agenda, you had this as discussion and possible action. I do have some of that density information if you'd like that now. Yes? Okay. So just from a density comparison standpoint, and we do this by units per acre. So once again, our urban and residential district allows 12 dwelling units per acre. Some of the more recent projects I think that we've looked at, we have the Lincoln Street apartments here across from City Hall. Those are at a density of 25.7 dwelling units per acre. Since we talked about Sienna Ridge, those are the ones that Steve was mentioning by his house. Those are at 18.36 dwelling units per acre. There's 2 apartment buildings in Scenic Ridge, the Scenic Ridge subdivision. Those are actually both just very slightly under 12 dwelling units per acre. So that was done with straight zoning. So that is an example of a project that is with no exemptions as part of the plan development process. The Sugar Creek Commons project, which is just down the street from this area, that project is currently at 40.7 dwelling units per acre. Higher density, partially because as you get on these larger roads, the intent from a planning perspective too is you typically try to locate more dense projects on areas that have more traffic, more people, and plus if you start talking mixed use, a few people touched on it tonight, you need the density to help support some of that commercial component to it. So yeah, Murray Glen Apartments, I guess this will be the last one. This is up in just north of Pasquale's. That has a mix of townhouses that are market rate, and you also have senior living and a memory care facility. That is at 26.3 dwelling units per acre. So the projects that you looked at, you talked about tonight, Gorman and Company was at 17.6 dwelling units per acre. McKenzie was at approximately 26.5 dwelling units per acre. North Point Avanti was at 23.6, and then Steve Brown Apartments was at 19.6. So you're in that typical range of what you see on Lincoln Street, which is kind of the western edge of the downtown. You're under what's at Sugar Creek Commons, which is at that 40 dwelling units per acre. The densities you saw tonight are in that Sienna Ridge range, kind of up that Lincoln Street apartment range. My advice, and I've said this to a lot of people and developers and public, is I don't know if you want to get hung up on the number. I would encourage you to get hung up on the form. What does it look like? How is it designed? Is it 3? Is it 4 stories? Does it fit with the character? When you kind of get into the density kind of counting game, you get into that, how many 1 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, how many 3 bedrooms. If you have more 3 bedrooms, your density technically is going to be lower. But I would encourage you to look at more out of the form and design of it versus the number of units, just because long term, you remember that building for what it looks like, not that building has 96 units in it. So that's my piece of advice and always recommendation is focus on design. How does it fit? Because end of the day, you're stuck with that. The number is just a function of what you make it, of the density, of the acreage of the units. So with that, I know staff, as part of our, part of our memo that we put together for you, we encourage the CDA to kind of discuss the proposals here tonight. It is noticed on the agenda for potential action. Some of the action that you could take is if there is a desire for a certain developer, you could recommend that developer to the Common Council. You could delay acting on the proposals until a future meeting. You don't have to take any action tonight. You could sit back, you could think about it. You could potentially narrow the list down. You could narrow the list to potentially two separate developers. You could bring those developers back and have additional conversations. Or you could have potentially a joint meeting with the Common Council to kind of look at those proposals as well. Ultimately, whichever proposal is selected by the council has the final authority. The recommendation is going to be to work with that developer on their ultimate design, layout, planning, development agreement, etc. Obviously, there's a public process here as well. Catherine kind of talked about that a little bit too. That's a process that would have to be gone through by the developer ultimately before they were to acquire the property and start the development process. So that's kind of where, from a staff level, where the committee can be at, the CDA can be at tonight. But I'll just be happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it over to you guys.
If we decline to make an action tonight, does that delay things from going to city council? Does that delay everything?
I don't think it delays everything. I mean, the target for us is still our acquisition with the school district is in November. I think the target, and Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think the RFP targeted June to kind of select it. Yes, to select a developer. So I don't think it puts you too far behind. So no, I don't think you have to take any action tonight. I think the question is if you don't take action, but what is the next step though?
I would also like to point out that some of the developers and others who have applied want us to stay as close to that schedule as possible, mostly for their applications to get grants and WIDA and other funding mechanisms moving forward. So that's the other reason why we didn't delay our interviews until after we could meet in person. We wanted to do that now to give us the time to do it in June or July to make those decisions.
If I could, I guess, yeah, I would like to, I think I would like some time to think about this, like a week or two. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff I liked. I think some of the stuff is on the city. Like, we talk about walkability and making it friendly for people in the neighborhood. I think a lot of that's going to come down to how the city does, works with the streets, how we handle other properties that are adjacent, things like that. I think, like I said, to reiterate, the two most important things for me are getting some sort of commercial development, retail on Verona Avenue, and the public space. And I just want to, think to myself what the best proposal is, which one has the most potential, and kind of how to go from there. But I'd be happy to hear what other people say. If someone, especially if somebody like absolutely loved one and just feels like we need to pick it right now, like I would love to hear if anyone felt like that. But I think there's a lot of strong proposals, and I would like some time to think about it.
I would like to hear what I think other people I mean, I appreciate hearing what your priorities are and what lens you're using. I think that's helpful that we can all be on the same page. Two of the things that I kind of reviewed them with regard to, I also think that there's a demand for commercial space along Verona Avenue. I don't think we have some of that we have lots of boxes, but we don't have a lot of walkable commercial. I think there's a market for that, so I appreciated that. But also because it activates that street front, which I think if we're ever going to have a walkable corridor and connect this public space and have it be something more than a park where people go to play soccer, which we have a lot of those in the city, that was something that I thought was useful. Obviously, the diversity of housing that we didn't have is also something that played into how I reviewed them.
Is it feasible to get this onto the next city council agenda just to look at, to gather people's opinions, or do you want to keep it within the CDA and do a recommendation?
My gut, as the person who helps set the agenda for the council, would be maybe just a reminder to people that council members should go and watch these presentations so then they can have an idea and that there won't be a delay. But that in the meantime, we should maybe wait for a recommendation from the CDA. But
yeah,
I mean, people
make the meeting real long.
well, right, if it's the first time everyone's hearing about it at the council, I mean, yeah, we could end up basically rehashing what the CDA already did if people don't listen to it. I prefer to avoid that. But I mean, some of the stuff like TIF and things like that's a council decision, So I would want at least the council to be aware that was on the table.
Right. I would like a little bit more time too, I think, just to process. I mean, I read through all of these, but yeah, hearing them talk about it and whatnot just gives me some more perspective. I would like to kind of toss around in my brain.
I would agree with that as well. I think reading a lot of text in those 4 proposals is one thing to digest. It's another to then have someone narrate it and kind of talk about a little bit more from the using the term, the visionary aspect of it, to kind of just take a little bit of time to match those 2 things up, to match some of the feeling you got from presentation with some of the data and the facts that are in the RFP responses. Again, I don't think this is an ask of, a month of time, but if we could look at a little bit of time to come back and then say, you know what, I felt these 2 looked better. I reflected on my notes and from the presentation and from the proposals, I feel better than, I guess, giving a recommendation. So I concur.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Brett.
Steve, if you're talking, it looks like you're on mute.
Yeah.
Try that out, Steve.
It's not a Zoom meeting if someone doesn't talk on mute.
He's still on mute.
Trying to get him.
Oh, okay. I think there's going to come a time when we're just going to want to bite the bullet and perhaps take a vote. And my suggestion is, in accordance with yours, which is that we need to wait at least a couple of weeks. If I had to vote on them, I know what my 1, 2, 3, and 4 would be. And, perhaps in 2 weeks we could all do that and discuss it and make our recommendation. Does that make sense to everyone else?
Yeah, it works for me.
So do you want to target a meeting potentially the week of June 1st? Just since I have most of the people here right now. Does anyone have any vacations planned that week?
Where are we gonna go?
My backyard.
But not that week.
I've already canceled 4 vacations.
Okay,
that week works for me.
Okay, well, maybe we can send out a doodle for that week. I know we have a plan commission meeting that Monday night, but we can possibly try sending out a doodle for some other days of that week, and see if we can get some availability, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, it works.
You know, one of the things I've done some RFP scoring in my professional job, and to echo on Steve's last comment, I would suggest that we come in with a ranking to that next meeting individually, and we may find that we might all match our number one and our number two, and that might make that meeting go a lot faster than debating all four proposals. So if we can hold ourselves accountable to that.
The bottom of Catherine's form has a ranking slot.
Perfect.
So if you use it, you're good.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the ranking form that was in the packet was the criteria included in the RFP. So I think that's what we kind of used internally as staff went through it. So that's how we initially had 6 and got down to the 4 tonight. So I think it's a great idea, Brett. Definitely look at that sheet, try working off it, and maybe come back in a couple weeks here and we can be productive.
Okay, so are we done?
Okay, so I guess I'll recap. So I guess what I'm hearing is Catherine can send out a doodle possibly tomorrow. We can start looking at some dates that week. We've got a lot of people in attendance who are dropping off right now as I'm talking. Ouch. If anyone wants to be notified of when that next meeting is, I guess send Catherine an email. I know she's got a list going already. Wow, they're really going quick. Send Catherine an email just to be added to that list that she sends out for these meetings on this topic. I know she's got some neighbors on there, but then she's also got some developers who've expressed interest. So of the people that haven't bailed yet, reach out to Catherine if you haven't.
I guess my only question is there a better time from when I do the doodle poll that everybody's kind of shooting for, like not at 6 because of dinner or not at 5 because of dinner?
6 is good for me, or a little bit later.
6 is good for me.
Okay, then I'll just do that rather than doing it multiple times within the same dates for the poll.
Okay, well, I think staff is all set. We know what we need to do, and I think the CDA knows what they need to do with the scoring sheet. And I guess just the one comment is if you do fill out that scoring sheet and we work off at the next meeting, that's a public document, so just maybe at some point, Catherine and I can collect those at some point, because if you're basing that off your basis of what you're recommending, I'd like to have that just for the record. It'd be a clean record for us, and we would appreciate that. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
I will move, so moved.
Second. Nobody, no second. We can't adjourn.
I'll second.
Second.
I'll second.
All right. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Oh, we should have the vote. Should have the vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 See everybody in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Everybody.
Have a good one, everyone.